What if I told you that one of history's most powerful men spent his final moments not crying for more time, not begging for mercy, but saying something so simple it almost sounds boring? Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome at its peak, supposedly whispered just a few words before he closed his eyes forever. And when you hear what he actually said, it changes everything you thought you knew about death, power, and what really matters when your time runs out. Most people think his last words were something deep from his meditations, something poetic, something that would make you want to get a tattoo of it. But the truth is far more human than that. And honestly, that's what makes it so powerful. I'm going to tell you exactly what Marcus Aurelius said, what it means, and why these final words reveal more about Stoic philosophy than any book could teach you. Because when you strip away the empire, the armies, the gold, and the legacy, what's left is just a man facing the same thing we all will one day, and how he handled it might just change how you see your own life. So here's the thing about Marcus Aurelius. This guy wasn't just some random philosopher sitting in a garden thinking about life. He was the emperor of Rome, the most powerful person in the known world. He had legions of soldiers. He had endless wealth. He could have anything he wanted with a snap of his fingers. But if you read his personal writings, the Meditations, you realize something strange. He was constantly reminding himself that none of it mattered, that death was coming, that everything he built would crumble, that his body was just flesh that would rot like everyone else's. He wrote things like, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." He wasn't being morbid. He was being real. He knew that power was temporary. Fame was temporary. Even the mighty Roman Empire was temporary. And he was right, because here we are 2,000 years later, and Rome is just ruins and tour guides. Now, Marcus didn't have an easy life despite all that power. His reign was filled with wars, plagues, and betrayals. The Antonine Plague killed millions of people across the empire. He spent years on military campaigns in the freezing north, fighting Germanic tribes who wanted to tear down everything Rome had built. His own son, Commodus, turned out to be a disaster waiting to happen, though Marcus didn't live to see just how bad it would get. By the time Marcus was in his late 50s, his body was breaking down. Years of military campaigns, the stress of ruling an empire, and probably the plague itself had taken their toll. Ancient sources tell us he was sick for a long time before he finally died. He knew it was coming, and unlike most people who try to deny death until the very end, Marcus had spent his whole life preparing for this exact moment. So picture this. It's March of the year 180. Marcus is in Vindobona, which is modern-day Vienna. He's in a military camp, still dealing with wars even though his body is failing. He's surrounded by soldiers, advisors, and probably his son Commodus. The man who had meditated on death for decades is finally facing it for real. According to the ancient historian Dio Cassius, Marcus Aurelius refused food and drink in his final days. He wasn't trying to drag it out. He wasn't fighting the inevitable. He had accepted what was coming, just like he'd written about so many times. The Stoics believed that we don't control when we die, but we do control how we face it. And Marcus was putting his philosophy to the ultimate test. His officers and close friends were around his bedside. They were probably expecting some grand speech, some final piece of wisdom from the philosopher emperor, maybe a dramatic statement about the glory of Rome or the nature of existence, something they could write down and pass on for generations. But that's not what happened. According to the sources we have, Marcus Aurelius looked at the people around him and said something like, "Why do you weep for me? You should be thinking about the pestilence and death that is the common lot of us all." And then his actual final words were even simpler. He reportedly said, "Go to the rising sun, for I am already setting." That's it. No grand philosophy lecture, no dramatic goodbye. Just a simple statement acknowledging that his time was over and that life goes on. The sun rises, the world continues. The empire will keep going without him, or at least it will try. Now, some historians question whether these were his exact words. Ancient sources sometimes disagree or embellish, but here's what matters: whether he said exactly this or something close to it. The sentiment is pure Marcus Aurelius. It's pure Stoicism. It's the culmination of everything he believed and taught himself through his writings. Think about what he's saying. Go to the rising sun. In other words, move forward. Look ahead. Don't waste time mourning me. The future is what matters, not the past. I'm done. I'm setting like the sun at the end of the day. But you're still rising. You still have work to do. This is the opposite of what most powerful people do when they're dying. Most emperors and kings throughout history spent their final moments desperately clinging to power, making sure everyone knew how important they were, trying to control what happens after they're gone. But Marcus had spent his entire adult life practicing the art of letting go. He knew that death wasn't something to fight. It was just another natural process, like the sun setting at the end of every single day. In his Meditations, Marcus wrote, "Death, like birth, is a secret of nature." He also wrote, "Pass through this brief patch of time in harmony with nature, and come to your final resting place gracefully, just as a ripened olive might drop, praising the tree that nourished it, and grateful to the branch that gave it growth." The man had literally been rehearsing his own death in his mind for years. He had visualized it, he had accepted it, and when it finally came, he faced it exactly as he said he would. But here's the deeper lesson that most people miss. Marcus Aurelius wasn't just teaching people how to die. He was teaching people how to live. Because if you truly accept that you're going to die, if you really internalize that this could be your last day, your last hour, your last conversation, then you stop wasting time on things that don't matter. You stop worrying about what people think of you. You stop chasing status and wealth like they're going to save you from anything. You stop putting off the things you actually care about because you assume you'll always have more time. You don't. Marcus knew he didn't, and neither do you. The Stoics had this practice called memento mori, which means remember you will die. It sounds dark, but it's actually liberating, because when you remember that your time is limited, you start making better choices. You start saying what you actually mean. You start treating people with more kindness because you realize that any interaction could be the last one. You stop sweating the small stuff because you see how small it really is. Marcus lived this every single day. Even as emperor, he wrote reminders to himself that his power meant nothing in the face of death. He wrote, "You are a little soul carrying around a corpse." Brutal, right? But also true. We're all just temporary consciousness piloting meat suits that are slowly breaking down. And once you accept that, really accept it, you start living differently. So, when Marcus said, "Go to the rising sun, for I am already setting," he wasn't just talking about his own death. He was giving one final lesson. He was saying that life is a relay race. Your job is to do your part, to live according to your values, to do the work that's in front of you, and then to pass the torch to whoever comes next. You don't get to keep playing forever. Your turn ends, and that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. The tragedy is that Marcus passed the empire to his son Commodus, who turned out to be one of the worst emperors in Roman history. Commodus was everything Marcus wasn't. He was cruel, selfish, delusional. He thought he was the reincarnation of Hercules and made people worship him. He fought as a gladiator in the Colosseum, which was seen as shameful for an emperor. He nearly bankrupted the empire with his excess. Everything Marcus had built, everything he had tried to teach about virtue and duty and self-control, Commodus destroyed. Some people see this as Marcus's biggest failure. How could the philosopher king raise such a terrible successor? But here's the thing. Marcus knew he couldn't control what happened after he died. He knew he couldn't force his son to be a good person. All he could do was live according to his principles and hope that his example would matter. And in a way it did. not to Commodus, but to us, 2,000 years later. We're still reading his words. We're still learning from his example. We're still talking about how he faced his death. That's the real power of how Marcus Aurelius died. Not that he said something clever or profound, but that he demonstrated something true. That you can have all the power in the world and still be humble in the face of death. That you can spend your whole life building something and still accept when it's time to let it go. That the way you handle your final moments reveals who you really were all along. Most of us won't die surrounded by soldiers and advisors. We won't be emperors with unlimited power. But we will all face that same moment when we realize our time is up. And the question is, will we face it like Marcus Aurelius did, with acceptance, with grace, with a recognition that the world doesn't revolve around us? Or will we fight and panic and rage against something that's completely natural and inevitable? Marcus chose acceptance, not because he wanted to die, but because he understood that fighting against nature is pointless. The sun rises and sets whether we want it to or not. Seasons change, bodies age and break down, empires fall, and all of it is exactly as it should be. Fighting against it doesn't make you brave. Accepting it and living fully anyway, that's what takes real courage. So the next time you're stressed about something, ask yourself what Marcus would think. Would he spend his energy worrying about something he can't control? Would he waste his limited time being angry at how things are instead of dealing with them as they are? Would he fear death so much that he forgot to actually live? The answer is no. He'd remind himself that he's mortal, that this moment right now is all he really has, that the sun is going to set on his life eventually. So he'd better make his time and the light count for something. And then he'd get back to work, doing what needed to be done, treating people with respect, and trying to leave things a little better than he found them.